I never thought I would witness the complete collapse of a father-son relationship in real time. My friend Thomas was once a proud, successful businessman who believed sending his son Jessie to boarding school was giving him the best opportunity in life. What he never realized was how his entitled attitude and dismissal of Jessie's desperate pleas for help would eventually cost him everything that truly mattered. Before I share this heartbreaking story, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop a like and subscribe if you value family above all else. Thomas and I had been friends since college, and I watched as his life transformed from a carefree student to a corporate executive consumed by status and success. After graduating with his MBA, Thomas quickly climbed the corporate ladder at a prestigious financial firm in Manhattan. By his mid-30s, he had the corner office, the luxury apartment, and all the trappings of success that our society tends to value. When he met Laura during a charity gala, it seemed like another perfect addition to his carefully curated life. She was beautiful, intelligent, and from a well-connected family. They married within a year, and Jessie was born shortly after. From the outside, they appeared to be the perfect American family. But life has a way of dismantling our carefully constructed facades. When Jessie was just 4 years old, Laura was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. Within 6 months, she was gone, leaving Thomas a widower with a young son who desperately needed emotional support that Thomas had no idea how to provide. I remember visiting their home in the months after Laura passed. While Thomas buried himself in work, little Jessie would sit quietly in his room, surrounded by his mother's possessions. A scarf that still held her perfume. A well-worn novel with her handwritten notes in the margins. A collection of seashells they had gathered together during their last family vacation. These items became his most sacred treasures. Tangible connections to the mother he was too young to fully remember but desperately missed. Thomas viewed his parental responsibility through an entirely financial lens. He hired the best nannies, enrolled Jessie in private elementary school, and made sure his son never wanted for material things. But what Thomas failed to understand was that his physical presence and emotional availability were what Jessie truly craved. When Jessie would attempt to share his drawings or tell his father about a book he had read, Thomas would nod distractedly while checking emails on his phone. Birthday parties were often attended by the nanny, while Thomas sent expensive gifts in his absence. The pattern of emotional neglect was established early, though at the time I do not think Thomas even realized what he was doing. As Jessie approached his 12th birthday, he had grown into a thoughtful, creative young man with his mother's gentle temperament and artistic sensibility. His teachers noted his exceptional writing ability and his talent for connecting with others through storytelling. But these were not qualities that Thomas particularly valued or understood. During one of our occasional dinners, Thomas confided in me that he was concerned about Jessie becoming too sensitive. Too much like Laura was what he did not say but clearly implied. He wanted his son to develop the cutthroat business instincts that had served him well in his career. And that was when he first mentioned Westfield Academy. The connections he will make there will set him up for life. Thomas told me, swirling expensive scotch in his glass. The alumni network includes senators, CEOs, even a former president. This is the opportunity I never had, growing up middle class in Ohio. When I asked if Jessie was excited about the prospect of boarding school, Thomas waved away my question. Kids never know what is good for them. Once he gets there and sees the facilities, the opportunities, he will thank me. This is what responsible parenting looks like, making the tough decisions your child might not appreciate until later. The day Thomas dropped Jessie off at Westfield Academy remains vivid in my memory because Thomas recorded much of it on his phone to show me later. The imposing Gothic architecture of the main building, the manicured lawns, the students in crisp uniforms, all projected exactly the image of prestige that Thomas had paid for. But watching the video, what struck me most was Jessie's expression as he stood clutching his suitcase. His eyes were wide with undisguised fear darting between the intimidating surroundings and his father's proud face. As they approached the dormitory, Jessie suddenly stopped walking. "Dad, please," he said quietly, his voice trembling slightly. "I do not want to stay here. I want to come home with you." Thomas chuckled and put his hand firmly on Jesse's shoulder, guiding him forward. "This is not up for discussion, son. Do you know how many strings I had to pull to get you admitted mid-year? This is one of the finest educational institutions in the country. But all my friends are back home." Jesse protested, his voice growing smaller. "And who will help me if I have problems? You will make new friends here." "Better ones," Thomas assured him dismissively. "And the school has counselors if you need anything. But part of growing up is learning to handle problems on your own. This place will make a man out of you." When the time came for Thomas to leave, Jesse clung to him with a desperation that should have been a warning sign. But Thomas simply disentangled himself, straightened his tie, and reminded Jesse to call on Sunday for their weekly check-in. As Thomas walked back to his car, he did not look back to see Jesse watching him from the dormitory window, a small figure already being swallowed by the imposing institution that would become his personal nightmare. In the weeks that followed, Thomas spoke about Jesse's new school constantly. At business dinners, he would casually mention his son attending Westfield, as if dropping the prestigious name gave him additional social capital. He showed photos of the campus on his phone with the same pride other parents displayed pictures of their children. What Thomas did not show was any awareness of how his son was actually adjusting to his new environment. Their weekly calls were brief, with Thomas doing most of the talking. When Jesse attempted to share concerns, Thomas would quickly pivot to discussing grades or asking about the sons of important business associates who also attended Westfield. "Have you met Bradley Harrington yet? His father and I are working on a merger. Could be good for you to befriend him," Thomas would say, completely missing the hint of distress in his son's voice. During one call about a month into Jesse's time at Westfield, I happened to be at Thomas's apartment. When Jesse asked if he could come home for the upcoming long weekend, Thomas covered the phone and whispered to me, "He needs to learn to be independent. These early homesickness phases are normal." Then into the phone he said, "Sorry, son. I have meetings all weekend in Chicago. Best to stay there and get involved in campus activities. The school calendar shows there is a field trip to the museum on Saturday." "That sounds interesting." After hanging up, Thomas seemed genuinely puzzled by my concerned expression. "What the school psychologist said, some separation anxiety is normal for new students. He will adjust." What Thomas failed to understand was that Jesse was not experiencing normal homesickness. He was descending into a nightmare that would fundamentally alter the course of his life and their relationship forever. What Thomas could not see from his Manhattan office was the harsh reality of life at Westfield Academy for a mid-year transfer student without the right pedigree or connections. While Thomas considered himself successful in the stratified world of Westfield, the son of a self-made executive was several rungs below the children of third-generation wealth and political dynasties. Jesse's first week established his position in the unspoken social hierarchy. During orientation, when students introduced themselves, the casual mentions of family foundations, private islands, and political connections made Jesse's background seem common by comparison. When he mentioned his father worked in finance, one boy smirked and asked, "For whose family office?" When Jesse did not understand the question, the message was clear: he was an outsider. Initially, the exclusion was subtle. Conversations that stopped when he approached. Study groups that somehow were always full. Seats at the dining hall that were mysteriously saved for someone else. Jesse wrote about these experiences in emails to his father that Thomas skimmed between meetings, responding with platitudes about giving it time and making an effort to fit in. By the third week, the treatment had escalated. Jesse returned from shower to find his bed soaked with water. His school uniform disappeared from his closet the night before, an important assembly, resulting in a disciplinary mark for improper attire. His assigned seat in the dining hall would be covered in salt or sugar just before he sat down. The ringleader of this campaign was Preston Wellington IV, a third-generation Westfield legacy whose grandfather's name adorned the science building. Preston had identified Jesse as an easy target, a scholarship case, with no influential family to protect him, quiet and unlikely to fight back. Preston's inner circle included the sons of a state senator, a hedge fund billionaire, and a famous film director, all of whom followed his lead in making Jesse's life miserable. During their weekly calls, Jessie began trying to communicate his struggles to his father. "Dad, some of the guys here are really giving me a hard time," he ventured during their fifth-week call. Thomas, distracted by emails on his second screen, replied, "That is normal, son. Boys will be boys. You need to stand up for yourself. I tried, but there are 5 of them, and Preston's dad is on the board of trustees, so the teachers do not really." Thomas cut him off. "Listen, Jessie, every worthwhile environment has its challenges. When I was starting out, the senior partners would send me for coffee at 2 in the morning and make me redo reports for a single typo. It built character. This is just part of paying your dues." As the harassment intensified, so did Jessie's pleas. Text messages detailed specific incidents. His history paper shredded before it was due, being locked in a storage closet for 3 hours, having his mother's novel thrown into a toilet. Each message was met with increasingly impatient responses from Thomas. "Handle it yourself. This is why I am paying for you to become independent. Stop exaggerating for attention. Back in my school days, we dealt with much worse without running to our parents." One night in April, after Jessie had been at Westfield for just over 2 months, the situation reached a new level. He had been working on an important English essay when Preston and his friends stormed into his room. They grabbed his laptop, holding it hostage, while demanding he write their biology lab reports. When Jessie refused, they did not just take his computer. They found the box where he kept his most precious mementos of his mother. The seashells were crushed under expensive loafers. The scarf was tied to the dormitory flagpole overnight in the rain. The book was torn apart page by page in front of him. When Jessie tried to fight back, he was held down while Preston recorded a video of him crying, threatening to share it online if he reported anything. That night, Jessie called his father 17 times. Each call went to voicemail. What Jessie did not know was that Thomas was at an exclusive client dinner, where taking calls from his son would have been considered unprofessional. When Thomas finally checked his phone at 11:30 p.m., he saw the missed calls, but decided it was too late to call back. Whatever it was could wait until morning. By morning, Jessie had given up on his father coming to his rescue. The next day, he sent a lengthy email detailing everything that had happened, and included photos of his destroyed possessions. The email concluded with a direct plea. "Please, Dad, I need to leave this place. They are destroying everything that matters to me, and no one here will help." Thomas read the email during a taxi ride between meetings. He felt a momentary pang of concern, but quickly rationalized it away. Teenagers were prone to dramatics. Jessie had always been sensitive like his mother. The school was expensive and prestigious. Surely they would not allow any truly harmful behavior. He typed a quick response. "Sorry to hear you are having a rough time. We'll discuss over our call this weekend. Remember that setbacks build resilience. Focus on your studies." What Thomas did not realize was that this dismissive response was the final thread breaking in the bond of trust between father and son. From that moment, something fundamental changed in Jessie. The open, emotional boy began to disappear, replaced by someone guarded and self-reliant out of necessity. 2 weeks later, when Thomas made a perfunctory call to the school administration, expressing mild concern about some social adjustment issues his son had mentioned, the assistant headmaster assured him that everything was fine. Boys this age often have interpersonal conflicts as they establish social boundaries, the administrator explained smoothly. "I can assure you that Westfield has a zero-tolerance policy for bullying." Perhaps Jessie is having difficulty adapting to the academic rigor and projecting those frustrations onto his peer relationships. Thomas accepted this assessment without question. After all, these were educational professionals with decades of experience. If they were not concerned, why should he be? What Thomas failed to understand was that Preston's father had recently finalized a 7-figure donation for a new athletic facility, and the administration had been instructed to ensure his son's school experience remained pleasant and uncomplicated. The breaking point came during the traditional end-of-semester initiation ritual for new students. What was officially described to parents as a bonding tradition to welcome newcomers into the Westfield Brotherhood was in reality a sanctioned opportunity for established students to humiliate and dominate their vulnerable peers. Jessie and 5 other mid-year transfers were taken to the old boathouse after curfew. The ritual began with relatively benign challenges, reciting the school creed while standing in freezing water, eating disgusting food combinations, performing humiliating acts like barking like a dog or acting out embarrassing scenarios. But Preston had special plans for Jessie. When it was his turn, Preston announced that Jessie had not shown proper Westfield spirit and needed additional orientation. What followed was a calculated assault disguised as tradition. Jessie was blindfolded and told he would be doing a trust fall into the arms of his new brothers. Instead, he was pushed down a short flight of stairs into the lower storage area of the boathouse. The fall resulted in a broken wrist, a concussion, and multiple lacerations. The other students, suddenly aware that things had gone too far, panicked. They constructed a story about Jessie sneaking out alone and accidentally falling while exploring the old building. The school administration, eager to avoid scandal, readily accepted this narrative. Jessie spent the night in the local hospital. Through it all, he repeatedly asked the nurse to call his father. But Thomas was in London for an important business trip and had his phone on Do Not Disturb mode. When he finally received the message about Jessie's accident 12 hours later, his primary reaction was annoyance at having to reschedule meetings to deal with what the school had assured him was a minor incident. By the time Thomas arrived at the school 3 days later, Jessie had been released from the hospital and returned to classes with his arm in a cast. The administration presented Thomas with accident reports and insurance forms, all highlighting Jessie's violation of curfew as the cause of his injuries. "Boys will test boundaries," the headmaster said, with an understanding smile. "I am sure this experience has taught Jessie the importance of following school rules." Thomas nodded in agreement, even adding, "He has always been a bit reckless, takes after his mother that way." When Thomas finally visited Jessie in his dormitory room expecting a tearful reunion, he was shocked by the calm, composed young man who greeted him. Gone was the emotional boy who had begged not to be left at this school. In his place was someone with a carefully neutral expression and eyes that revealed nothing. "The doctor says your wrist should heal completely," Thomas offered, uncomfortable with his son's steady gaze. "Yes," Jessie replied simply. "You know accidents happen, but you really should follow the rules about curfew." Thomas continued, falling into the familiar pattern of lecture, rather than listening. Jessie studied his father for a long moment before responding. "Is that what you think happened?" "An accident," Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "That is what the school report says." "And you believe that without question, without even asking me?" "Well, I assumed you would tell me if there was more to the story," Thomas replied defensively. Jessie's laugh contained no humor. "I have been telling you for months, Dad. I have called, texted, emailed. I have begged for help. But you never listened. Why would I bother trying again?" The conversation left Thomas uneasy, but not enough to take any meaningful action. He returned to New York the next day, telling himself that at least Jessie seemed to be developing the thicker skin he had hoped for. What Thomas failed to recognize was that he had witnessed not resilience, but the birth of a wall that would eventually become impenetrable. The transformation in Jessie over the following years was remarkable to anyone paying attention. Unfortunately, Thomas was not. He noticed the surface-level changes, improved grades, participation in debate club, even an eventual position on the student council. What he interpreted as successful adaptation was actually Jessie implementing a calculated survival strategy. Jessie had realized several crucial truths after his hospitalization. First, his father would never be the protector he needed. Second, the school system was designed to protect itself and its most privileged students, not outsiders like him. Third, the only person he could rely on was himself. With this clarity, Jessie began to navigate Westfield with cold precision. He identified other outsiders, scholarship students, foreign students, anyone who existed on the margins of the school's social hierarchy. He formed alliances based not on friendship but mutual protection. Together they created systems to warn each other of impending harassment, to document incidents, to provide alibis when needed. Academically, Jessie channeled his pain into achievement. He recognized that excellence was a form of armor in an institution that prized achievement above all else. Teachers who had previously overlooked him began to take notice when his papers became exceptional, when he dominated class discussions, when his test scores topped the class rankings. Preston and his cronies did not stop their harassment entirely, but its nature changed. Where once they had attacked with impunity, they now found themselves facing unexpected consequences. When they stole Jessie's homework, they discovered he had prepared a decoy while submitting the real assignment digitally to the teacher in advance. When they attempted to sabotage his science project, they found the equipment mysteriously malfunctioning in their own experiments instead. Most importantly, Jessie began documenting everything meticulously. Every text, every email, every incident went into a secure digital record, along with witness statements from his new allies. He was building a case, though for what purpose, even he was not yet certain. By sophomore year, Jessie had established a reputation as someone not to be trifled with despite his quiet demeanor. Teachers respected his intellect. The administration nodded approvingly at his academic achievements and growing list of extracurricular accomplishments. Even Preston maintained a wary distance, finding easier targets for his cruelty. All the while, Jessie's relationship with his father continued to deteriorate behind a facade of normalcy. Their weekly calls became exercises in small talk, with Jessie sharing only the most superficial details of his life. When Thomas asked about friends or school activities, Jessie provided just enough information to satisfy the question without revealing anything meaningful. Summer and holiday breaks were equally hollow. Jessie would return to the Manhattan apartment that had never truly felt like home to find his father largely absent, still consumed by work and social obligations. They orbited each other like distant planets, going through the motions of family life without any genuine connection. By junior year, Jessie had begun planning his escape. With the help of a particularly supportive English teacher, he applied for competitive writing programs and summer internships across the country, ensuring he had legitimate reasons to be away from both school and home as much as possible. He researched colleges far from New York, focusing on those with generous scholarship opportunities. Thomas remained oblivious to these machinations, interpreting Jessie's increasingly independent activities as signs of maturity rather than estrangement. When Jessie won a prestigious national essay competition, Thomas proudly shared the news with colleagues, never mentioning that he had not actually read the piece, which was ironically about the hollow nature of success without authentic connection. By the time Jessie began his senior year at Westfield, he had secured early acceptance to a university in California with a full academic scholarship. He had lined up a summer job and housing that would allow him to move directly from graduation to the West Coast without returning to New York. The pieces of his exit strategy were falling perfectly into place. The graduation ceremony itself was a masterclass in polite distance. Thomas arrived with an expensive watch as a gift, beaming with pride as Jessie delivered the valedictorian address. In photos from that day, they stand side by side, Thomas with his arm around his son's shoulders, Jessie with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "I am so proud of you, son," Thomas said, as they posed for photos. "You have truly made the most of the opportunities I provided." Westfield was clearly the right decision. Jessie looked at his father for a long moment before responding with careful neutrality. "It certainly taught me valuable lessons about life." Thomas misinterpreted this as gratitude rather than the indictment it was. The summer that followed marked the beginning of Thomas's dawning awareness that something was fundamentally wrong in his relationship with his son. When Jessie announced he would be staying in California for an internship rather than coming home, Thomas felt the first real pang of loss. His texts and calls received increasingly delayed and brief responses. His offers of financial help were politely declined. The apartment, always quiet now, felt oppressively empty. By Thanksgiving of Jessie's freshman year of college, Thomas was genuinely concerned. Jessie had declined to come home for the holiday with a vague explanation about study commitments. Christmas brought a similar rejection, though Jessie did send a generic gift card with a pre-printed greeting. Thomas found himself staring at the impersonal signature on the card, trying to reconcile this cold gesture with the emotional boy he remembered. In a rare moment of self-reflection, Thomas reached out to me for advice. "I do not understand what is happening with Jessie," he confessed over drinks. "He has everything he could want. I paid for the best education I have offered to help with expenses, even though he has that scholarship. What more could he want from me?" The fact that he framed everything in terms of financial provision rather than emotional support spoke volumes about why the relationship had deteriorated. But Thomas was not yet ready to hear that truth. Throughout Jessie's sophomore year of college, Thomas made increasingly desperate attempts to reconnect. He sent expensive gifts that went unacknowledged. He offered to visit California, only to be told Jessie's schedule was too busy. He even tried using business trips to San Francisco as pretexts to see his son, only to have Jessie agree to brief, perfunctory meetings in public places that left Thomas feeling more like an acquaintance than a father. During one such meeting at a coffee shop near Jessie's campus, Thomas finally asked directly, "Son, have I done something wrong? You seem so distant." Jessie looked up from his coffee with an expression that contained years of suppressed pain. "Do you really want to have this conversation, Dad? Because once we do, we cannot go back." Thomas, genuinely confused and increasingly desperate, nodded. "Of course I want to know if something is bothering you." Jessie considered him for a moment, then shook his head slightly. "Not here. Not now. If you really want to understand, come to my apartment for dinner during winter break. We can talk properly then." Thomas eagerly agreed, clinging to this invitation as hope for reconciliation. What he did not realize was that Jessie was not offering reconnection but closure. The dinner scheduled for December 23rd was meticulously planned by Jessie. He prepared a simple meal in his modest apartment, which Thomas noted with some dismay had no photographs or mementos connecting Jessie to his life before college. The space was clean, functional, and entirely devoid of sentiment, much like the relationship had become. After an uncomfortable meal filled with small talk, Jessie cleared the table and returned with a laptop and a thick folder of documents. "You asked what was wrong between us." Jessie began, his voice calm and controlled. "I think it is time I showed you." What followed was a methodical presentation of evidence that left Thomas shattered. Jessie had compiled every desperate text message, every pleading email, every voicemail begging for help that had gone ignored during his time at Westfield. He showed medical records documenting injuries inconsistent with accidental falls. He presented witness statements from other students confirming the systematic abuse he had endured. Most damning of all, he had recovered security camera footage from outside the boathouse on the night of his major injury, clearly showing him being forced inside by Preston and his friends. "I sent you this evidence years ago," Jessie explained, his voice devoid of emotion. "You never bothered to really look at it. You never bothered to really listen to me." Thomas sat stunned, unable to process the mountain of evidence, showing both the extent of his son's suffering and his own catastrophic failure as a father. "But why did the school never step in?" he finally managed to ask. Jessie laughed bitterly. "Preston's family donated the new athletic center. The headmaster's son was part of Preston's group. The school nurse who treated my initial injuries was married to the board chairman. The entire system was designed to protect them, not me." "Why did you not tell me how bad it was?" Thomas asked, his voice breaking. Jessie stared at him in disbelief before opening a file on his computer. "This is a transcript of a call we had in April of sophomore year. I literally told you, and I quote, 'Dad, I am afraid they might really hurt me next time. Please, I need to leave this school.' Do you remember your response?" Thomas could not remember, his mind reeling from revelations that were rewriting his understanding of the past 5 years. Jessie played an audio recording of Thomas's voice. "Stop being so dramatic, Jessie. Westfield is one of the top schools in the country. Do you know how many strings I had to pull to get you in there? Just focus on your grades and stop trying to get attention with these stories." The silence that followed was deafening. "That was the day I stopped seeing you as my father," Jessie said quietly. "That was the day I realized I was entirely on my own." Thomas began to weep, the full weight of his failure crashing down on him. "I had no idea. I thought you were just having normal adjustment issues. I never imagined." "That is the problem," Jessie interrupted. "You never imagined anything beyond your own narrow vision of success." You never saw me as a person with actual needs and feelings. I was just an extension of your ego, another status symbol, like your car or your apartment. That is not true, Thomas protested weakly. I love you. Everything I did was for your future. No, Jessie countered firmly. Everything you did was for the future you imagined for me without ever asking what I wanted or needed. A parent who loves their child listens when they cry for help. A father who cares would have pulled me out of that hellhole the first time I begged to leave. Thomas reached across the table, desperate to connect. Please, Jessie. I made terrible mistakes, but we can fix this. We can rebuild our relationship. Jessie moved his hand away. That is why I wanted to have this conversation, to make it clear that we cannot. Some things cannot be fixed, Dad. Some betrayals are too fundamental to overcome. With clinical detachment, Jessie outlined his decision. He was legally changing his last name to his mother's maiden name. He would be completing his degree and had already secured a job in Seattle afterward. He would not be contacting Thomas again and requested no further attempts at communication. This is not a negotiation or a temporary break, Jessie explained. This is me officially informing you that I am removing you from my life permanently. You failed in the most basic duty of a parent to protect your child. I have accepted that, and now you need to as well. Thomas left the apartment that night a broken man. The carefully constructed narrative of his life as a successful father providing the best for his son had been completely shattered. In its place was the devastating truth that he had sacrificed his only child's well-being on the altar of prestige and social status. The months that followed were the darkest of Thomas's life. He tried desperately to reach Jessie through calls, texts, emails, even letters, all of which went unanswered. He showed up at Jessie's apartment in California, only to discover he had moved without leaving a forwarding address. He contacted the university administration, but was informed that Jessie had placed a privacy lock on his student information. Thomas's work began to suffer, as he fell into a deep depression. The career that he had once prioritized above all else now seemed meaningless. The luxury apartment felt like a mausoleum filled with reminders of his failures. He began drinking heavily, his social appearances grew rare, and his once meticulously maintained appearance deteriorated. In a desperate attempt to understand where he had gone so catastrophically wrong, Thomas began investigating Jessie's time at Westfield more thoroughly. He hired a private investigator who uncovered even more disturbing details about the systematic abuse that had occurred under the guise of tradition. He contacted other parents, whose children had mysteriously transferred out of Westfield, piecing together a pattern of institutional neglect and cover-ups that made him physically ill to contemplate. When he attempted to take this information to the school board, he was quietly but firmly stonewalled. The power structures that had failed to protect his son now closed ranks to protect the institution's reputation. Thomas found himself on the outside of the very elite circles he had once so desperately wanted to join. The final blow came when Thomas received formal notification of Jessie's legal name change. The document was accompanied by a brief note. This is the last communication you will receive from me. Please respect my decision and do not attempt further contact. It was only then, facing the complete and irrevocable loss of his son, that Thomas finally began to understand the true cost of his entitled attitude and misplaced priorities. The prestigious education and social connections he had valued so highly had cost him the only relationship that truly mattered. 3 years have passed since Thomas received that final letter. In that time, he has undergone a profound transformation, born of unbearable regret. He left his executive position for a less demanding role that allows him time to volunteer with child advocacy organizations. He sold the luxury apartment that had never been a real home and moved to a modest condo, where he lives simply surrounded by the few photos he has of Jessie. Thomas began therapy, a step he had always previously dismissed as unnecessary weakness. Through those sessions, he came to understand how his own childhood, with emotionally distant parents, had shaped his definition of fatherhood as primarily financial provision rather than emotional presence. He recognized the entitled thinking that had led him to believe his money and status could substitute for genuine connection. The most painful realization he confessed during one of our rare conversations about Jessie is that I repeated exactly what was done to me. I swore I would be a better father than mine was, but I just found a different way to be absent. Thomas has attempted to make amends in ways that respect Jessie's boundaries. He established an anonymous scholarship fund at Jessie's university for students who have experienced bullying or trauma. He has become an outspoken advocate for reform in boarding school oversight and regulation, though he is careful never to mention his son by name in these efforts. Through mutual connections, Thomas occasionally hears bits of information about Jessie's life. He graduated with honors and now works for a technology company in Seattle. He is engaged to a kind creative partner who shares his passion for writing. Most significantly, Jessie has established a mentoring program for vulnerable youth, creating the support system he never had during his own darkest moments. Thomas keeps a file of these small updates, never reaching out but taking bitter comfort in knowing that his son has found happiness and purpose, despite not because of his parenting. The knowledge that Jessie has become a compassionate, successful adult is both Thomas's greatest joy and his most painful reminder of what he threw away. Last month, Thomas wrote a letter he knows he will never send. In it, he documented everything he wishes he had understood when Jessie was young: that a child needs presence more than presence, that listening is more important than lecturing, that safety and trust are the foundations of love. He acknowledged every mistake without excuse or defense. He expressed gratitude that Jessie had found the strength to break the cycle of emotional abandonment that had damaged them both. The letter concluded not with a plea for forgiveness but with an acceptance that some consequences are permanent. "You were right to protect yourself from me," Thomas wrote. "I failed as your father in every way that truly matters. My greatest regret is that I realized too late that success is not measured in degrees or dollars, but in whether your child feels safe calling you when they are in trouble. By that measure, I failed completely. By that measure, you are succeeding brilliantly with the young people you now mentor and protect." The true lesson of Thomas's story is painfully clear. Parenthood is not about status or providing opportunities at the expense of emotional security. It is about being present, listening deeply, and standing as a shield between your child and harm. Thomas confused entitled provision with genuine love, and the cost of that confusion was a relationship that can never be recovered. For those of us who witness this tragedy, the warning is stark. Children need parents who will believe them, protect them, and value their emotional well-being above social standing or future networking opportunities. No prestigious institution or potential career advantage is worth sacrificing your child's trust and safety. Thomas lives with the knowledge that he cannot undo the past. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. Some trust once broken cannot be restored. He moves through his days, carrying the weight of the relationship he destroyed through his entitlement and neglect, hoping that by sharing his cautionary tale, other parents might recognize the warning signs he missed before it is too late for them. The greatest tragedy is not that Thomas lost his son, but that he never truly knew him until it was already too late. Have you ever witnessed a situation where someone prioritized prestige or status over their family relationships? What would you have done differently if you were in Thomas's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content that explores these complex family dynamics. Remember, sometimes the most important parenting lesson is learning to truly listen to our children before it is too late. Thank you for watching, and I hope this story helps someone recognize what truly matters before they make the same irreversible mistakes.